I don't want to go too technical due to the strict time requirements we have, but I don't want to skip the first point, which is to give you an understanding of why confidential containers could matter to you, why they could be a solution for your problem, because this is something we technical people often skip a little bit too lightly. I will still give just a brief intro on how they work, and then see how, with contrast, we approach them to make them more usable. So in Felix's keynote, initially he already gave the general idea of confidential computing, and of course it's somewhat similar with confidential containers, right? Try to solve a similar problem, having a secure front door. There is still a lot of risk surface in a modern cloud deployment. So if we have our application, we deploy it as a container. Underneath that container, there's a lot of software and hardware and potentially tenants that have access to those layers that could still access your code and data. And that can be Kubernetes. I mean, this could be your own administrators, but with the recent announcement from Wiz, we've seen that even Kubernetes could be a potential risk itself and could be an entry to get hold of your application. The same goes on, right? We can go to the hypervisor layer, the cloud infrastructure layer, right? The software that just runs the hardware underneath, and then the hardware itself, the physical access to the data center. And the idea with confidential containers is that we cut off at the container level, as the name suggests. So we package your container in a confidential computing environment to isolate it against that infrastructure. That's the goal, right? To protect us against all of the threats that lure beyond that Kubernetes layer. And I see three main pillars to use cases where this can be a useful solution. One is, right, protecting against the infrastructure, protecting against the cloud service provider, either through regulation forcing you to do so, or intrinsically to just mitigate against the risks that I've just shown. Another use case we commonly see is some form of multi-tenant isolation. So you have one common platform, but you run multiple instances or for different users or different customers, and you want some form of physical isolation without physically replicating the same system over and over again, right? And confidential containers can do so if with physical isolation we mean confidential computing isolation. And lastly, with workload isolation and attestation, what I mean is that as a user, for example, of a SaaS solution, of a software as a service solution, I can actually verify what's running there, who has access to that system.